Hi everyone, I'll be walking you through sample practical exam 1 today. The first thing that you need to do is log into the lab computers. Once you're logged into the lab computers, do not open Eclipse or log into iLearn because you're going to do that in the safe exam browser. What you actually need to do is on the left side, there'll be a link for Launch Java Practical Exam. And that's gonna open a safe exam browser whose password is exam time, all in lower cases. On my computer, I only have access to Chrome. I don't have access to Eclipse in my safe exam browser, so I'm going to do it outside the safe exam browser. But you will be doing it in the safe exam browser. The password for that is exam time, all lower cases. Once you are inside the safe exam browser, we have configured that Eclipse and the browser opens automatically. But if it doesn't, you can always open it on the left bottom side. Open Eclipse and browser as in internet browser. If it doesn't open automatically, it should, but if it doesn't, open it. So now you'll open the browser, which has been configured to go to iLearn and login. I've just put the safe exam, the practical exam, the sample practical exam in week 3. You're going to download that. Now it should download the file to C drive users downloads, your user account downloads, but if it doesn't, that's where you should. So you're going to open this practical exam and start attempt. You can see that it says the quiz has been set up so that it may only be attempted using the safe exam browser. You cannot attempt it from this web browser. So if it was a real attempt, that's the error that I will get. But right now it's okay. Import the project from template. I know that it was not very clear that the template is a hyperlink, so I've made it very clear in the actual exam. When you click on it, it's going to save it and then open Eclipse. Eclipse is going to ask you for the workspace location. And the location must be set to C drive /users/ whatever your student ID is. So that must be the workspace's location. So when it asks you, choose that. If it doesn't ask you, go to Eclipse, File, Switch Workspace, and choose a new workspace. And over here you can browse C drive, users, etc., which I'm not going to do on my computer. Then you'll go to Workbench, and it's going to take you to the play area essentially, and import the project using File, Import, General, Existing Projects into Workspace, not root directory, but archive file here, Browse. Under Downloads, you can see there is a file containing the project, and Finish. The project contains a source directory which contains all your Java files, which contains the default package, which contains 7 files. The only files that you're supposed to modify are question 1 through question 5. All-in-one test has all the tests together, so you can get a final snapshot of your marks. Each question has the question followed by the test that is actually testing the question. Obviously, you cannot change the test. You're not supposed to touch the test. You're only meant to modify the method. So one very, very important thing for you to do is to make sure that you read the specifications carefully. Question 1 specification says, return true if the point represented by x, y, which are the first two parameters, lies inside a window of size width, height, which is represented by the last two parameters. It says that the points that are inside the window are all the points from 0, 0 to width minus 1, height minus 1. And there's an example provided there, but that is just an example. You're not supposed to use the values 600 and 400. 600 is a sample value for width, while 400 is a sample value for height. Now the first thing is, there's a return false statement, because if I didn't have that, there'll be a compilation error. So you can remove that if you want to start your code. Now, my logic for this question is fairly simple. If x is a negative value, if x is less than 0, do I need to check anything else? Do I need to check y or width or height? No. If x has a negative value, I can immediately return false, which means if I reach line 25, it is guaranteed that x is more than or equal to 0. So once we know that x is more than or equal to 0, we can check y. Is y less than 0? If y is less than 0, return false. Again, if you reach line 30, it is guaranteed that y is also more than or equal to 0. So both of them are more than 0. You can check if x is less than, x is more than. Now note that if x is equal to width, it's not a valid coordinate, because the last valid x value is width minus 1. So if x is more than width minus 1, and that's the important bit, we can return false. Similarly, if y is also more than height minus 1, we can return false. If you reach here, it means that x is more than or equal to 0, y is more than or equal to 0, x is less than or equal to width minus 1, and y is less than or equal to height minus 1, which means you can unconditionally return true. Of course, you can do this whole thing by checking if x more than or equal to 0 and y more than or equal to 0 and x is less than width. Either you can use x less than width, or you can use x less than or equal to width minus 1. Either way is right. And y is less than or equal to height minus 1. Return true, else return false. That's another solution. Both of them are correct, but in the exam environment, I suggest that do things more simply than in a more complex fashion. Once you have finished your method, you can click on the play button. It's going to run the test, and a green line means that your test has passed. So unless you actually coded to the test where you've checked if x equals 12 and y equals 10 and width equals 100 and y equals 50, return true. Similarly, if x equals 100 and y equals 49 and width equals 100 and height equals 50, return false. That's called hard coding. If you hard code, your test will pass in the exam, but when we run our own tests where we'll insert one more simple test, something like this, for a 600 by 400 display window, 100, 200 should be inside. It will fail. So do not hard code. Save this. And question 2. Question 2 is to add all the multiples in the range low to high of n. So add all the multiples of n that are in the range low to high. Some examples are given at the bottom. For example, between 4 and 10, the multiples of 3 are 6 and 9. and the sum of 6 and 9 is 15. As I said in week 2 and 3 lecture, this is an accumulation algorithm, so you need a variable to hold the result. Get rid of the return 0. You then need to run through the range required, which is I equals low, I less than equal to high, I plus plus. This checks every integer between low and high. If I make a silly mistake like checking I less than high instead of less than equal to, of course the right hand bound will not be checked, so I'll get a failure. So let's try that. We are checking if the current integer I is divisible by n, and if it is, your R increases by the current integer I. When the loop finishes, and you can see when I bring the cursor here, the opening curly bracket is boxed, and that gives you an indicator that the loop has finished. So I'll put a comment here, end of loop. When the loop finishes, you can return your answer. And the compilation error goes away because you have returned an answer. Of course, if I run this, the test will fail. Now, when a test fails, you should look very closely. When a test fails, you should look very closely at the assertion failure. So expected 45, but was 25. When you click at question2.test add multiples question2.java 33, it will take you to line 33, and it tells you that the test is failing for this test case. So the multiples of 5 between 10 and 20 are 10, 15, and 20. And your answer is 25, but it should be 20. So it's fairly clear that 10 and 15 were added, but not 20. And that's because I had less, not less than equal to. Make that change, run the test, and it passes. Question 3, count occurrences. This is, again, an accumulation algorithm where you're counting how many times target exists in the array. Again, we'll need a variable that counts something. You need to go through every item of the array. So the loop is I less than 0, I less than data.length, I plus plus. Please note that it is not I less than equal to, because the last item is at index data.length minus 1. So let's see what happens when I use I less than equal to data.length. I'm checking if the current item given by data I equals the target that I'm looking for. And if that's the case, it means I've found another occurrence of target, so the result that I had should increase by 1. My condition finishes and my loop finishes. And when the loop finishes, I can return the answer. Save it, and when you run this piece of code, it will give you an array index out of bounds exception 9 at line 19, resulting from the test case count occurrences a, 2. You can see that the number of items in this array are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it says that you're accessing the item at index 9, which basically means you've gone too far. And therefore the condition should be I less than data.length. Run this and it passes. At any stage during the exam, you can run the all-in-one test as well, and it gives you a bit more feedback about your overall progress. So when I run this, in my console, it says your score is now 65 because the 3 tests that you have passed. Question 1 has passed, question 2 has passed, and question 3 has passed. So it's a bit more formative feedback. We'll move to question 4, and unlike question 2 and question 3, which were essentially accumulation algorithms, question 4 is a violation algorithm. What you're supposed to do is return true if all the items of the array are more than this value threshold, which means that if you find even one value which is not more than threshold, you can immediately return false. But you cannot return true as soon as you find one value which is more than the threshold, because the subsequent values might still be less than or equal to threshold. So we'll go through each item of the array. I haven't said this before, but it's always a good habit to put a curly bracket in front of a condition, because when you press enter, Eclipse automatically creates the closing bracket for that loop or condition. Inside that, the mistake that a lot of students make is they check if the item is more than threshold, return true, else return false. Now that's a big problem for us, because A, they return true as soon as they find one value which is more than threshold. So if your first value is more than threshold, you're going to return true immediately. But as you can see in the tests, even though 5 is more than -8, -8 is not more than -8, so it should return false. So this logic is incorrect. And what it should do is, you should be checking if data I is less than or equal to threshold, which is the violation to the requirement. If that's the case, return false. You will also notice that there's a complaint by the method that it must return a result of type boolean, because the return statement you have is inside a condition which is inside a loop. So it's possible that the loop never executes. Even if the loop executes, it's possible that the condition never executes. But of course, if the loop finishes, what does that mean? It means that we've reached line 22, which means that we never executed line 19. Otherwise, we would have already finished the method. And if we never executed line 19, it means that the condition in line 18 was never true. So it means that none of the items is less than or equal to threshold. So no item is less than or equal to threshold, which implies and further implies that all items are above threshold. And therefore you can return true. And that's your all greater than. And the test passes. Question 5 is the more challenging method. Now please note that it's a high distinction question worth 15 marks. There's one thing that I've missed in the tests, and that is a scenario where I have something like this. So I'm trying to find the array A and let's name this array H, and also 1090, let's name this array H and JKM equals this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a test which returns true when the array H, to check if the array H exists in the array M. So you can see that 10, 70, 90, 120, 130 is here, 10, 70, 90. And just to make it a bit more interesting, let's add 150 and 190 as well. But the thing is that the first item of H is found at index 3, not at index 4, 5, 6, 7. So it should check for every occurrence of the first item of the array in the second array. So what we're going to do is that we can break this problem down as well. So we're going to write a method and just a dummy call, index of in an array, let's say outer, of the item inner starting at index 0. So index of starting at. I can create a method index of starting at, change it to public, but you don't really need to change it to public. Call this data, call this item, and call this starting index. So what it does is starts from I equals start as long as I is less than data.length I plus plus. If data I equals the item, it immediately returns I. If the loop finishes, it returns -1. Control A, Control I completes your completes your method. Okay, Control I. I'm getting an error, and it says the method is correct. Too many brackets. That should be right. Oh, it is right. Yeah, my mistake. Sorry. Okay. So now what I've done is I've written this helper method, which is going to help us greatly. The first thing we'll check is if inner length is more than outer length. There's no point checking anything because a bigger array cannot exist in a smaller array. Now I'll say starting point is index of starting at in the array outer for the item inner 0, the first item, and starting at index 0. That gives us the first starting point. And as long as starting point is not -1, because if starting point is -1, the first item doesn't exist. Now that we know that the first item exists at start point, I'll say int idx equals start point. Or you can also say for int id equals start point, idx less than start point plus inner dot length idx plus plus. The reason I'm doing this is because in this example, let's say in the last example, inner 0, which is 10, is found at index 3. Since we need to go through every item of inner, so the loop must execute 5 times. So starting at 3, we need to go till 7, including 7. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's less than 3 plus 5, which is less than 8, which is 7. If inner idx minus start point, because we want to compare inner 0 against outer idx, which is 3. So inner 0 against outer 3, inner 4 against outer 1, inner 5 against outer 6, and so on and so forth. If they're not equal, return false. If you reach this loop, it means that all the pairwise checks were successful and you can return true. Sorry, one more thing. Just because it's false here doesn't mean that, just because this sublist did not match doesn't mean that the next sublist cannot match, or this sublist cannot match, and so on and so forth. So we're not going to return false. We're going to say boolean success is true and success becomes false. Of course, if success did not become false, if success is still true, which we can just write it as if success, we return true. But if success is false, we're going to try again with the next value, with the next occurrence of inner 0. So we're going to put this over here, but instead of starting at 0, we're going to start at 1 after the start point. And this loop is going to keep checking as long as it finds a failure, but as long as it doesn't find a failure. Only if it finds a failure will return false. Let's take a look at that, and what do you know? It passes. So you can see the amount of effort required in question 5 is substantially more than the other questions combined, but that's what's going to take you from distinction to high distinction. And that's it. Thank you very much and all the best in your exam. Please remember the important points, that your workspace must be C drive/users/your student ID. And of course, I forgot the most important thing. How do you make submissions? So once you finish the questions, select all these files. You can select them one by one by pressing the Control key, or you can click on question 1, press the Shift key, press question 5. And I don't think Alt-Tab works in Safe Exam Browser, so you might have to place these two windows side by side. In your quiz, the first box is the text box. You don't have to do anything there, and you're not uploading files in there. So if you try to do that, it's going to leave the site. Don't do that. You're moving all these files, question 1 through question 5, into the files box. So drop files here to upload. Once you do that, it will show the 5 files, and save and review, and finally the most important button, submit all and finish. Another confirmation, and it records your submission and state changes to finished. You are done. You can quit the Safe Exam Browser, and with the permission of your tutor, if he or she allows, you can leave the room. Thank you very much and all the best with your prac exam.